Good evening and welcome to the special council meeting for Monday, November 7th, and we are beginning at 6 o'clock. At this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. Are there any emergent items from any of the councillors who are Zooming in? And anything from Councillor Wegener? It's just you and me here tonight. Thank you. Anything from admin or legislative services? No? Then I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Councillor Wegener.
I move that council adopt the November 7th, 2022 special council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you for that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion is carried. Thank you. That brings us to item 3, business. 3.1, 2023 proposed operating and capital budget. Mr. Scoble, are you starting us off tonight?
Yes, I will be. Thank you. So we've got a PowerPoint to put up here. All right, so good evening, council. So I'm pleased to introduce the 2023 budget this evening. So administration recognizes this is a difficult time for residents and businesses, as we've all been challenged with 7 to 8% inflation and recovery from the pandemic this past year. And we will still feel the impacts of these in the next year and perhaps for a few more years to come. So given these considerations, coupled with historical debt and reserve challenges that both council and administration have shown commitment to resolving, significant effort was put in by administration to mitigate these. So administration has undertaken a comprehensive review to find significant cost savings and efficiencies while not compromising on programs and services, the current levels of which the residents have clearly communicated are important to them in the recent citizen satisfaction survey. So with this, administration is proposing a total tax increase of 4.9% for both residents and businesses. For comparison, the 2022 tax increases were 3.9% and 5.9% for residents and businesses, respectively. So this represents both a prudent approach to the current years to continue current programs and services and maintain current infrastructure while not undertaking any significant capital works or new initiatives or programs, but also a look towards a sustainable future with provision to begin reestablishing reserves in 2023. So I'm very proud of the work administration has put into this proposed budget. They didn't need to be told what had to be done. They knew what had to be done, and they have all put very long hours into the budget at the upper end of all the budgets I've seen prepared in the past. So I'd like to acknowledge their commitment and thank them for it. So this year we're using a new standardized process going forward. And while we expect the process to evolve and continually improve, there are no plans to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, but instead refine a process that council, the community, and administration will become familiar with as we go forward. So 2023 is a reset year. There have been a number of standing or recurring items that historically not in the base budget that should have been. So we've put those into the base this year. There has been a comprehensive review of the budget, which was undertaken. We've reviewed our 5-year actuals and made decisions based on actual spends. And as discussed, we were able to find a number of efficiencies and cost savings in a number of areas. You know, the years of no to well below inflationary increases, tax increases are in the past. This is a common learning of municipalities of late, as knowledge of asset life cycles requiring strong reserves evolve and lessons learned to maintain strong contingency funds for events such as pandemics, instead of reactive drawing down of small reserves and incurring debt to manage both predictable and unpredictable long-term fiscal sustainability issues. While the proposed budget is front-end loaded and a lot is being thrown at you, significant time has been allocated for both council members and the public to review and weigh in prior to council deciding on the final budget for the community. There are no plans to reduce funding to service level groups. In fact, there's a slight increase that has been budgeted for to allow for inflationary increases in support of those groups. As part of the new process, early in the new year, administration will be undertaking a debrief for continuous improvement in future years. Part of this will be a dedicated debrief session with council to provide your feedback on what went well and what changes you would like to see to the process and methodology in upcoming budgets. So the town's budget has been built around council's strategic plan, and opportunities to redeploy funds into these priority areas have been taken where available. From a financial perspective, we are focused on maintaining existing service levels, reducing debt, building up reserves, and supporting the strategic plan. So historically, municipalities have had limited revenue service sources permitted by the province, including tax, rates, fees, penalties, grants, and municipal corporations. Taxes have always been the main source of revenue to deliver municipal services and programs. Over the years, many of the traditional sources of revenue, particularly grants, have been declining, increasing the reliance on taxation. So how do communities facing increasing reliance on taxation remain fiscally responsible? By working on both the revenue and expense sides of the equation. So significant work was undertaken this year to rationalize the expense side of the equation, and this will continue in the future. But with the law of diminishing returns, the efficiencies will get smaller and smaller each year. This in time will produce nickels and dimes when dollars are needed to remain fiscally sustainable. So the emphasis on the expense side will be on innovative opportunities such as priority-based budgeting and shared services. But we must also look to how do we increase our revenues. So on the revenue side, in the absence of non-traditional revenue streams such as municipal corporations, or the reestablishment or growth of historical levels of grants, it is about innovative taxation strategies that do not increase the tax burden on either existing residents or existing businesses. So to build on this, we're looking at the municipal tax split here, which is the proportion of the tax burden paid by each of the residential and non-residential taxpayers. So this slide shows the residential versus non-residential split in Strathmore. The figure illustrates that the tax split is about 80% residential to 20% non-residential, with a slow migration to increasing non-residential burden in general, which is headed in the right direction. And I'll discuss that a bit more on the next slide. So if we continue to move the dial towards a higher non-residential proportion, say to a goal of 70-30 as proposed in the municipal development plan under development, then for every $100 of diesel that we put in our plow trucks, for example, which we're filling quite a bit this week, of course, residents would pay $70 of this and businesses would pay $30 instead of residents currently paying $80 and residents paying, or businesses paying $20. So if we compare to other communities that we are good fits with relative to specified and public Alberta Municipal Affairs criteria and data, we are generally in line with communities that are either part of the Calgary or Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Boards. But comparable communities outside of the regional growth boards generally have a higher proportion of non-residential in their tax split, and thus a lower residential tax burden. Of course, Strathmore is no longer a member of the Calgary Regional Metropolitan Board as of earlier this year. So if we look at our neighbors to the north, Drumheller, for every $100 of diesel we put in our plow trucks, in Strathmore we're paying $81, and Drumheller residents are paying $63. So it's very important to note that this is not about simply shifting residential tax burden onto business taxpayers. And while that can be done, that is not the plan that is being proposed as we work with council on the upcoming municipal development plan. In fact, you will note in the proposed budget that administration is proposing the same percentage tax increase for residents and businesses, while an additional 2% was proposed for businesses last year. Instead, it's about densification of residential growth and organic growth of businesses, meaning expansion of existing businesses and attraction of new businesses. So residential densification is consistent with council's strategic plan and is becoming a necessity with housing affordability across the spectrum of demographics, from below market offerings to first-time home buyers to aging in place amenities. This doesn't mean Strathmore will not be building residential homes, but it does mean it will build more of that missing middle in housing offerings, making services and programs more efficient for, for those units, and conserving agricultural lands with increasing pressures on food supply and security with climate change and a growing world population. So phytoorganics is an example of organic growth of the non-residential base. In time, we hope that they will expand. They're a new business we've attracted, and in time, we'll hope that they expand. And we hope that we can attract more phytos, but it will require sound and calculated strategy on all of our parts. Council strategic plan and administration's accompanying corporate business plan support this approach. But I will also comment this is not a quick fix. It'll be 10 or 20 years in the making if we adopt this strategy so that our children and grandchildren can enjoy the quality of life in Strathmore that we do now. So with that introduction, I'm now going to turn it over to Kara and her finance staff to present the overall proposed budget.
So good evening, Your Worship and members of council. So as Kevin mentioned, administration conducted an in-depth review of the budget. We have found a number of savings in areas to minimize the potential tax increase on residents and businesses. This slide before you shows the average home assessment in 2022 versus 2023, along with the total taxes estimate. You will see that administration is proposing a 4.9% total tax increase for residential. These funds are collected in addition, we have a 3% increase for the provincial education requisition, and these funds are collected on behalf of the province and subsequently paid to them. Next slide, thank you. And so on this slide, you'll see that the taxes would be on a commercial assessment that's in the $1 million range. We are proposing an equal split in the tax rate, which would mean that commercial businesses would also see a 4.9 total tax increase in 2023. We've highlighted on this slide some of the significant changes in the budget, which includes increases from items such as the solar farm and franchise fees. You may be wondering why franchise fees revenue was increased. This is because they were previously underestimated in the prior budget. We have not increased the franchise fees percentage charged going forward. We've just simply corrected it to align with what we can expect moving forward. On the expense slide, we see a slight increase in salaries and wages to ensure that Strathmore stays competitive in terms of recruitment and retention with other municipalities in the region. We've also included a global reduction in staff training, conferences, and travel to align with trends over the past several years. This slide before you shows a summary of our current reserve balances. At a high level, the town has limited funds in operating and capital reserves. It's important to know that several of these reserves are actually already earmarked for specific items, such as the RCMP retropay, and then offsite levies are earmarked for specific projects. So in the 2023 budget, we've increased what is going into reserves from $780,000 to just under $920,000. As council is aware, administration is currently working on an asset management policy and program to ensure that we're putting enough funds away on an annual basis to pay for the long-term replacement of our infrastructure. We should be putting significantly more into reserves to pay for replacement of our infrastructure going forward. Going forward, administration recommends that when we pay off debt, instead of taking those funds back to fund town expenses, that we instead take those funds and put them away into reserves to help us plan for the future. In addition, administration will be bringing back a reserve policy in early 2023 to propose streamlining the number of reserves that the town has. These past two slides have a number of reserves that have been rolled up and grouped together. We would like to simplify this for the management of these reserves and to have greater clarity and transparency about each reserve's particular use going forward. So this slide is actually from the Municipal Affairs Index data set. We've used the same comparators as we did for the strategic plan pre-read package to keep it consistent for council. As per our strategic plan, one of council's strategic priorities is to reduce the town's debt. We will continue to show council this information on an annual basis to show our strides on reducing our debt moving forward. This slide shows where the town stacks up in terms of our residential taxes in relation to our comparators in terms of our average residential assessment and total taxes. This slide shows our taxes for commercial assessments. As you will see, we do have a favorable residential and non-residential split. To further support this, Council passed a tax incentive bylaw earlier this year, and we will continue to share the data with Council so the Council can see the positive impacts from that decision moving forward. I will turn it back over to Kevin to walk through his department budget.
Thanks, Kara. I think we can go right to the next slide there. Yeah. Okay, so this is the CAO's proposed budget for the following year. I'd like to say I've taken unprecedented reductions in my area, and while I have made a number of reductions, the significant proportion of savings you see here is for reallocating directors and expenses to individual departments for better tracking. There is a slight increase in the overall economic development budget to cover council strategic plan initiatives. We did find significant savings in funds that did not align or were not used to offset, as well as training. So again, that's that redeployment of funds we were talking about earlier. And there's also an increase in the HR budget, human resources, as some dollars that were previously in the executive budget have been reallocated to that department. We've added in the use of the town's WCB rebate to offset some funds for health and safety initiatives. And that came as a result of participating in the CORE Certificate of Recognition Safety Program. So as part of the work we've been doing there, we've actually received a rebate from WCB. So we're proposing to reinvest that into additional health and safety initiatives for the public, or for the employees. Really, in my area, the only business case that's being proposed is economic development market studies for $30,000, and that's for specialized consulting to support the different activities that we've published in the corporate business plan, such as competitiveness analysis, niche market analysis, some work on green tape. So just basically some specialized consulting dollars to help us execute on the corporate business plan, supporting the strategic plan.
So thank you, Kevin. So for our budget, our service areas include financial services, legislative services, communications and marketing, risk management, and information technology. So in reviewing this area, you will see an increase in salaries, which is from the corporate restructuring, which includes moving some cost centers into the SAFS department that were not previously included. Some other changes to be aware of is that we have reduced the IT budget by $60,000. We have found some internal efficiencies, which allowed us to remove these funds and allocate them towards business cases and other areas within the town. Legislative Services has a slight increase from the reallocation of the Agricultural Society contract for the Stampede. This was previously budgeted elsewhere, but has been moved to Legislative Services as they're managing it moving forward. There is a reduction in contracted services in communications and marketing. In reviewing the 5-year actuals, we made this change to align with the trends of spending over the past 5 years. We've also reduced the budget for Canada Day to $20,000. This covers our existing fireworks contract that we have in place for the next couple of years and provides some additional funds for this event. The other changes are the Director of SAFS budget, which includes 3 FTEs within it, has been reallocated from other areas. This budget is also the town's risk management budget. So for our business cases, we've included 4 business cases in the budget. The first is for corporate procurement training. In the financial services review, it was identified that greater emphasis needed to be put towards corporate procurement efforts. This training is to support the town with developing templates and then training staff on those templates. The RecLogic licensing is to allow for this software to be rolled out corporately. RecLogic allows for the automation of accounts payable in terms of the approvals and therefore does provide some organizational efficiencies. The advocacy consultant and associated expenses are to support council with fulfilling council's strategic plan on the advocacy initiatives. The expenses are to support council with any travel to Edmonton or other locations to meet with ministers, etc. And the special event insurance is a risk management requirement that has been identified for our larger events, such as Canada Day, and is a common practice in other municipalities. So for our capital projects, the administration is currently developing a surveillance policy governing the town's use of surveillance, data storage, and access to information. This assessment will be an important step to ensure that the town is in alignment with provincial legislation and guidelines and protecting the privacy of both the public and town staff. Administration is recommending the council authorize a surveillance assessment and funds for some initial cameras to comply with this assessment as part of the 2023 capital budget. Currently, the town's cameras do not all connect with one another, and some of the retention of them is not consistent with the town's records management processes and FOIP. In addition, we want to review their locations to ensure that we're leveraging cameras to support protecting our facilities and staff. In some circumstances, there are cameras that are pointing at public parking lots, which is resulting in an increase in FOIP requests and is of little benefit to the town overall. Council can anticipate that administration will be putting forward recommendations for additional camera changes in 2024 once we have the assessment results to ensure compliance and alignment throughout the town. And so I will go ahead and I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Kara. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So Community and Protective Services, as highlighted there, this budget oversees community and family and community support services, FCSS, municipal enforcement, fire and emergency management, recreation and culture, and has dotted lines over to the RCMP, which is one of our first concerns here. As you can see it on this next slide, we have some increases for this division. The biggest one is about approximately $190,000 in increased pay to the RCMP based on negotiations with the federal government. In addition, there's a consolidation of grants to external organizations to centralize all the funds under one umbrella, and so it's better for tracking and reporting purposes. And the last thing in terms of the changes is $100,000 in material inflationary costs associated with inflation. On this next case, you can see the 10 or so business cases that are being brought forward by the Community Protection Services Department. We're excited about bringing a fire building inspection fee to the public to help ensure that our businesses are compliant and safe for our citizens. We have a deputy fire chief, some contracted services that need to be increased. We have our aging equipment, which requires some new tires, safety equipment, and first aid supplies that correspond with COVID and the increased demands on our fire department. We have an Indigenous events, the powwow that has been previously discussed through council here. Some preventive maintenance systems at the pool. We're glad that's reopened, and with some safety equipment and uniforms that have been changed with the defunctness of a Red Cross. We also have a number of capital projects. As you can see here, several of them relate to expired equipment and or associated with the fire department. Their turnout gear, some materials to a positive ventilation fan, cleaners and dryers for their equipment, a rescue pack for their staff. We also have some of the things to ensure that our equipment, our existing infrastructure is maintained. And you can see here the ice plant compressor overhaul, a roof replacement at the aquatic center, and finally some change room partitions at the facility. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Jamie to speak to both the infrastructure operations and development.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm just going to go through some slides with regards to our 2023 budget. So the division here is responsible for all municipal roads, sidewalks, and pedestrian networks as well as water, storm, and sanitary infrastructure, rather. The operations group within the division is responsible for the maintenance of all of these facilities, as well as any town buildings and parks, with a focus on efficiency, service delivery to residents and stakeholders. The division includes the following departments: infrastructure, operations, development services, and finally, asset management. In terms of highlights for capital, many of the projects are related to critical maintenance and upgrade of roads, pedestrian networks, and the wastewater treatment plant. There's a spray park recirculation project that will reduce costs and conserve water, of course. There's a construction of the Lakeside Boulevard and Archie Kleiber Trail intersection signalization that will be completed in conjunction with the Strathpoint commercial development. And finally, some fleet replacements due to aging units there. On the operating side, there are increases to costs in some areas due to the inflation and increased input costs for things like fuel and other materials. No change to staffing in 2023, and service levels will generally remain unchanged. There's increase to contractual agreements, generally tied to the consumer price index, and these are related to mainly our garbage disposal and collection contract. We're also updating the stormwater master plan. And now that we've been a member of CSMI for more than a year, we need to upgrade our master plans to reflect that. There's increases in development services expenses related to the support of council strategic priorities. We're planning to be working along with economic development on some of those things, mainly around intermunicipal development and partnerships. So in terms of year over year, revenue is going up about 180,000 year over year. Our expenses, however, are also going up about $350,000 year over year from 2022 to 2023. If we can go on to the business cases, these are several of the operating business cases. The first one is related to building maintenance and repairs, and that ensures we're continually updating and maintaining and fixing things that go wrong with our buildings. We had to increase that slightly due to, again, those inflationary costs. In terms of the increase to on-call facility maintenance staff, we have 2 facility maintenance staff. We want to bring a situation in where they are available on call. That'll be a better service to all of our internal service providers to allow us to respond more quickly to issues at the rink and curling rink, et cetera, during off hours. The offsite levies review is specific to actually water costs. We want to make sure that our offsite levies are competitive with the region, and we're actually getting what we need in terms of building those capital projects over time. These 2 items, garbage collection and organics collection disposal, again, those are the 2 larger increases that go along with the waste management contract. Subdivision engineering consulting fees, that allows us to, the development group, to respond to any issues that come up through new development that we need to do further examination internally to essentially traffic impact assessments, things like that. $50,000 for a downtown revitalization strategy, again, working closely with economic development to develop a plan to support our downtown businesses. And then the final 2, intermunicipal planning, is to work on an IDP and perhaps ICF, as well as intermunicipal and economic development, again, to work with our regional partners in terms of how that continues to make Strathmore a great place to do business. On the capital side, these are the kind of one of the capital fleet replacements is a tandem truck. I think the existing unit is over 14 years old. So again, we want to make sure we're up and operating more than we're not. So it's time to replace that unit so it can be out on the roads doing that work. That's quite important these days. The second item, a cargo van for facility staff. We have 2 facility staff currently that are operating out of 1 vehicle. Adding a second vehicle, of course, will make that service much more efficient to all the different buildings. Spray park water recirculation system. Again, I mentioned that in the highlights. It will allow us to conserve a great deal of water over time and reduce our costs quite substantially on a yearly basis. The emergency exit stairwell for the operations building is actually a code requirement for the ops building. It currently doesn't have a second exit, so that's a fire code requirement. The Christmas lights for Kinsman Park, we're constantly updating and replacing those. They take quite a beating in the season type of weather we have, so they need to be replaced every year, some of them. The 240-liter organic collection cart to the green carts, we have a waiting list for many individuals, residents who want to replace their small cart with a larger cart. So we want to clear up that waiting list and have them have the larger carts, again, allow us more of a more waste diversion in our system. A pathway life cycle program, again, just ensures that we're repairing pathway problems as they come up. Capital projects and engineering, those dollars are used for design work on future capital projects. And finally, sidewalk improvements, again, to just fix those heaves and cracks that occur over our sidewalk network in town. Road asset management plan is a big one as well. Of course, all of our roads in town, we need to maintain them, make sure that anything is repaired at the right time, fix potholes, etc. So that's an ongoing process that is super important to residents. CSMI capital projects, again, as we're a member to CSMI, we want to make sure we're doing those, doing that work that we agreed to with the other partners. Wastewater treatment plant upgrades or plant PLC upgrades, that are the learning control systems for the wastewater treatment plant. Again, quite a critical component to a critical system in town. Lab equipment replacement. Again, we want to make sure we're still meeting provincial standards in terms of our wastewater treatment. So those that lab equipment is quite critical. Lakeside Boulevard and Archie Kleiber Trail intersection upgrade. Again, that's a signalization at that intersection that will occur and be ready when the Strathpoint commercial development does open. Some of those funds are coming from offsite levies as well. Wastewater treatment plant general upgrades. Again, those are identified by EPCOR. They're critical upgrades that we need to apply and complete to make sure our wastewater treatment plant is still operating optimally, and find a lift station upgrades, again, identified by our contractor EPCOR as critical upgrades for 2023. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Mr. Scoble, did you want to add anything before we go on to questions? Do we have Mr. Scoble?
Oh, you're muted, Kevin.
Sorry, I'm a little out of practice here. Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just one comment, I guess, that some of the business cases presented will have the potential to be offset by utility rates, which is proposed rates will come forward in the utility rates bylaws as part of the process later on here. So that would be my only additional comment. Thank you.
Mr. Scoble, as far as process, do you want questions to come obviously through you or to your directors? I have a few as far as a couple of the business cases, but what do you see as the most efficient way moving forward? I imagine we do need to identify page numbers if some of the councilors are asking specific questions.
Yeah, certainly. I think, for efficiency, by all means, go ask the director
Okay.
directly.
Thank you. I have a question, just a couple of questions before I turn it over to councilors as well. Mr. Dugdale, as far as downtown revitalization strategy, would you be able to elaborate a little more on what would be in on that? And the reason I ask the question is, over the last several years, we've done a lot of work in downtown revitalization, and I'm just wondering what it would entail.
Through the chair, sure. I mean, we'll probably work, planning staff will probably work quite closely with the economic development officer who's just recently come on board to determine what that looks like. I know there has been a lot of work done in regards to our downtown, but what that might look like could be a number of different things. It could be just a plan to set out some architectural controls on what new development should look like or what improved development should look like. Could also include some incentives to have people upgrade their facades in the downtown. So there's different components that we could look at. But I think what we want to do is have planning staff work with the EDO to kind of connect with business and find out what they think will be the most appropriate thing. In my experience, I've seen sometimes when municipalities or municipal government goes away and kind of thinks up some ideas and they don't connect with business, and sometimes there aren't things that are actually going to work. So we want to make sure we're working closely with the businesses to determine what is the best thing for the downtown of Strathmore.
Okay, thank you. And Kinsman Park Christmas lights, is that something that's funded through utilities at all, or where is that just coming from our budget? Is there any money coming from utilities?
That's just coming from the budget.
Okay.
I know one specific item that had been mentioned is, I know there were some residents who visited the festivities in past years, and we are considering getting an actual tree in the festivities instead of having I don't think we have technically a Christmas tree down there yet. So that's one thing we would consider to do with those funds.
Okay, thank you. Question for Mark? Two questions, actually, Mark. Deputy Fire Chief, we aren't paying a position as Deputy Fire Chief right now? Is this this is on page 29 of the business cases?
Yes, excuse me, yes, your worship, we have a small amount allocated to our Deputy Fire Chief Baz Azel.
Okay.
Baz Azel, what's his name? Baz. And what we're looking is a full-time deputy chief that would support the business inspections.
Okay.
And we're hoping that some of the revenue generated from that program would offset the salary. Obviously, there are additional services that this individual can service the department and the community as well.
Okay, thank you. And then one question on the Aquatic Center roof replacement. Was it an assessment we had done on the roof with some repairs in the last few years? Do you remember?
Yes, through the worship, we had an assessment done in 2019, and the lifespan of that roof at that time was 23 years on a lifespan of it that was 25. So it was red flagged for replacement. But unfortunately, during COVID and during the increased construction costs that were associated, dollars that were allocated initially for that were reallocated towards the arena roof, and with that one being a much higher priority.
Okay, thank you. And then I read later on, you have some funding sources for that as well, don't you? Just so that the public at home has an idea roughly of where the funds might come from? Is that 500,000 to the town, or is there some, I thought I saw that you had some other funding sources for that as well.
We're always we're attempting to secure other additional funds. We applied for it when we did for the arena roof. So there's always those avenues out there, but we'll have to see how those go.
Okay, thank you. Questions from councilors? I have Councilor Mitzner and then Councilor Peterson.
Hi, okay, so I have a question in reference to the downtown revitalization. The chamber hasn't changed much, nor have the existing businesses downtown. We spent 2 years with meetings on a regular basis, quarterly. There's got to be records there of what people wanted done, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd rather revisit the existing documents than starting from scratch again. My second question is on the splash park, to invest that kind of money, do we get to see what the cost savings is over how many years versus what we're paying for water now before we make that decision?
Through the chair, I guess just a response to your first comment, I guess we definitely will go through the process of looking at existing documents and materials before we just move forward on a new plan for the downtown. So thank you for that comment. In terms of the question on the spray park, we could put together how soon that will be paid back. It probably will be happening pretty quickly. I think the payback would happen over a couple of years. Our costs for water are quite significant on a monthly basis. The variable piece is, of course, every year that the season is different, but we could put that together and get it back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mitzner. Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for your questions too. My question is for Kara, and I missed it was the slide right before the business case slide, but it was your reference to the reallocation for the FCSS. And I was wondering if you could just go back to that and explain it, because I think I missed some of the critical portions of that. Or maybe if you just want to address, you talked about 3 positions reallocated, and I think I didn't understand or I misunderstood. And that I just was I'm asking only Your Worship for clarification. Thank you.
So I'm happy to answer that question. So myself and the Marcia were actually coded to the executive budget previously. So this is part of the reallocation that Kevin spoke about earlier. And then council will recall that you had approved for the former director of corporate services position to be split to fill a legal and risk coordinator position. So that is the 3rd position.
So to understand, no existing positions have been taken from FCSS or reallocate it from FCSS?
No, nothing from FCSS.
Ah, perfect. Okay, yeah, it was just a misunderstanding. Thank you so much.
Perfect, no
for clearing
problem.
that up.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understand the process, I guess, at this point. So there was the form, the BIR form, um, and that's so that we can ask questions, or the business information or the budget information request template. So that's so that we can ask questions like about what we were just presented. That's correct?
Through the chair, yeah, that's correct. Plus, as you read a little more in depth through the budget, this was, an introductory presentation this evening, but certainly there's lots of supporting documents there. So, if something comes up and, if you're thinking about making a motion to add or remove something from the budget and you want some more information about the ins and outs of that, that's sort of the idea is so we give you a response and then you can contemplate if you want to make a motion to add or revise or remove or whatever you're considering.
Thank you. Okay. And that's for not just capital. That's like, if there was some aspect of operating we wanted to enhance or reduce, we could ask for information about that as well.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, excellent. I guess like just based on, I one question that popped up for me that might be relevant right now, just has to do with the downtown business supports. Just for the public's knowledge, I'd be interested to have administration discuss why we would focus on supporting downtown businesses specifically, as opposed to the other businesses in the community.
Well, this is really about a strategy for the downtown to build on and complement any historical work done. Again, it's a pillar center, a congregating center in the community. With respect to non-downtown businesses supports, we have a number of programs that we're working on that our new ECDEV officer is targeting. And we're working closely with Community Futures in the chamber as well. We've also, got the new visitation program, right, where we're reaching out, and the mayor and I are going out to see any business in Strathmore, regardless of location, and understand their business and what we're doing well, what we can do better, and how the town can meet their needs. So, there's actually a direct one-on-one conduit for any business in St. Albert now that wishes it. So we're starting to see an uptake on that program, and we're starting to, mayor and I's calendars are starting to fill up with appointments. So.
Great. Thank you very much for explaining that. Yeah, and I guess so I will be sending one of those BIRs just with to follow up on Councillor Mitzner's question about the splash park. I'd be certainly interested to learn more about that. And then, and you said, when will we have an idea about the utility rate proposed changes?
That will be coming shortly. I might defer to Kara, but typically those are covered in the rates bylaw that's part of the final approval of council. But perhaps Kara, you can comment more on timing as to when we'll present that information.
So thank you so much for the question. We are currently in the process of finalizing the proposed rate bylaw to bring it forward to council. We were hoping to actually bring it forward to the December 7th meeting, just because we've been, as council can appreciate, we've been focused on the budget, but we want to make sure the council has it at the same time as when you're considering the budget as well for approval.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to kind of keep them as close together as possible, just because based on like feedback I've received from the public, they are seen as kind of one increase essentially. So it would be worth kind of considering those closely. Okay, and yeah, thank you very much. And I just want to say thanks a lot for what's been done with this budget so far. It's you guys are always improving, so I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Mr. Scoble, if I could reference or refer you to page 14. It mentions significant changes in revenue, $215,000 in taxes from the solar farm. At what point would, are lease payments considered part of new revenue, or is that something that's going to be occurring later? How does that factor in as far as revenue change to the 2023 budget, or does that come in later?
Well, yeah, thank you, Mayor, for the question. It's in the budget already, but it's not new revenue because we've realized lease revenue already. But we haven't realized taxation revenue until the province has done their assessment, which they're supposed to be doing this fall. I'm not sure of the status of that. So, typically when a facility goes operational, you don't get to tax on it for a year or so afterwards if it's subject to the provincial, even our own assessment, right? So, but the lease revenue is in there about $200,000 a year, but we didn't count it as new revenue because it was realized as well in 2022 here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mitzner?
With the $50,000 for downtown revitalization, rather than for improvements, could we use those funds to create the activities similar to our discussion for a farmer's market similar to St. Albert's to draw the people to the community to spend the money, not only downtown, but Walmart, highway, everything? Like to create something that people come for once a week. Is that allotted in that expense of $50,000? Please and thank you.
Through the chair, I mean, certainly it could be if that's, the will of council that you want to use some of that money towards that, then that could be clarified, I guess, through motion that, that includes the considering a wider, broader, larger farmers market.
Thank you, Councillor Mitzner. I would definitely agree with you. As a councillor who's been on, this is my 4th term now, we've spent a great deal of money in the in the downtown area, and maybe it is a matter of looking where that 50,000 could be best spent. And I do like that idea of the farmers market and finding ways to improve that as well. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. So my next question, well, I guess, yeah, my question is getting this out to the public. Can we have comms release our proposed budget just for feedback?
Kara, do you want to take that question, please?
Absolutely. So we have posted the budget on our website, and we will be doing some communications around the budget. We will also be asking and inviting the public to come and join our first 2 budget meetings to bring any feedback that they have regarding the operating or capital budget. So if they want to come and register to speak, they just need to connect with Legislative Services, and they'll slot them in and arrange that for them.
Okay, yeah, that's fantastic. And I just want to, I guess, point out for people in the public that might not know this, but this is the first time, that I've been on council that we've done something like that. So I just wanted to thank you guys again for the transparency and the openness.
Thank you, Kara, and thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Kara, may I ask you a question on page 14 as well, on the significant overall changes? Franchise fee revenue, is it correct that we've reached the maximum level now where it'll be set now? We don't have to have any increases in that?
So that is correct, that we are at the maximum amount for the franchise fees.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good news. Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. I had some questions from the public because they are interested in this opportunity, and they were wondering if they can or should pre-submit questions as well, and if there was a formalized process for that. I didn't check out the website, so I'm not sure if you already included it. You may have.
So we just released the budget, and so we will be, further communications will be coming. So I would just encourage the public to follow our social media and check out our website, and the process will be laid out there. But I know we have spoken with Legislative Services and Comms, and there will be an opportunity for people to pre-register if they can't attend. I can't see why we wouldn't take questions to be submitted in advance, and a member of administration can ask on their behalf.
Kara, could we provide council members with an email that residents could submit questions to in advance? I think that would be good for everybody. Gives us an opportunity to answer the question that evening instead of having to get back to them at a later date.
I really appreciate that, CEO, and to Kara as well, because some of the questions are high level and some of them are really, really specific. So it'd be just nice for administration to have them ahead of time too, I think. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr. Scobel, are we now moving on to the 2023 capital budget final draft presentation, starting at page 40? Is that our next steps?
Sorry, struggling with my mute button here tonight. Well, we've given an overview of it this evening.
Okay.
So there was no further presentation plan, but certainly if you wanted to ask some questions now or submit BIRs or whatever, anything is fine with us.
Okay. Maybe just in a general question, could you just explain the project weighting, just so if the public's seeing this online or councilors are a bit confused? This is the first time I've seen a budget presented like this with the project weightings, and if you could just speak to that a bit, that would probably be really helpful.
Sure. I don't know if we have a graphic handy we could show up, but basically this year we used a capital prioritization matrix, which looks at, different factors such as regulatory requirements, council strategic plan congruence, maintaining services, all that kind of stuff. And so we proposed weightings to council and council approved those weightings. So then the projects, when the business cases are submitted, they're evaluated against those weightings to rank them relative to importance, I guess you could say. So, again, that was looked at very closely in the budget, the capital budget items that have been put forth. They tend to be the highest ranked projects according to that process.
Okay, thank you. And one more general question, maybe to Mr. Dugdale. I see, and you've talked about the Pathway Life Cycle Program. Do we have plans for any new pathways in 2023?
Through the chair to you, Mayor, I'd have to take that one away. Of course, typically with new development, we do require that developers construct pathways within their developments. But I'd have to take that one away to see if there's any that would be town-led that will lead in 2023, and I can get that back to you.
Thank you. One in particular, we've always talked about the lack of accessibility into Wildflower, and I know we have a bridge that goes across the canal. There is a buffer of green space where the path from that lake going into Wildflower could shoot across Westmount Drive Westmount Drive North and connect up with the Lake Strathmore Lake pathway. That's something that would really help with Wildflower as far as mobility and connectivity, and give them at least another a footway to get out of that subdivision should something happen. They only have the one roadway out. But that's something maybe you and Kevin and I could get together on. And Councillor Wiley, maybe we could have you come in there as well, because you know the neighborhood quite well. And at this time, we'll go to Councillor Wiley.
I just want to echo some of the sentiments expressed by councillors tonight about how good this process has been with this budget. I'm really, as a first-year councillor, I'm really feeling like I've got my head around what's being done here. So I just really appreciate it. I have a couple questions. I was looking at the proposal for the fire building inspection fee, and it said there's 350-ish businesses in town that would be paying, I believe it said an annual rate of $200 a year. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor Wiley, that's correct. That would be the annual inspection rate. And that would again ensure that businesses are compliant with current business and fire codes and things like that, and ensuring the safety of our community.
And so what would be an examples of the smallest businesses that would be paying an extra $200 a year? Are we talking businesses that are just like home licensed businesses?
Through the chair, no, we're not talking about home business spaces. These are our brick and mortar businesses that would be within the town.
Okay, thank you. Another question I had is, I've only had the opportunity to scan this, but I was looking at one. It's on page 128. And it's referring to, I believe, 911 emergency calls. I'm just going to that page myself. And it said something about to consider going to Calgary 911 or Red Deer 911 and saving $90,000 a year. It's been looked at previously that was decided against. Does the current budget reflect us going with Calgary 911, or does the current budget assume that we stick with WDEMSA?
Through the chair, it's right now as with the administration right now through the fire department and previous chiefs has explored other 911 options. And as some of the dollars that are presented there, this current budget does include the cost of staying with WDEMSA. But as you can see through the business case, there's some additional costs associated with that service.
Okay, so just so I understand the process again, if I'm looking for more information on that, I would fill out one of these business, I can't remember what it was called already, but the paperwork that we received through email.
Yes.
Budget information request, got it.
Yeah, you betcha. BIRs works good. That's what I use.
BIR, okay. I was looking at this tandem truck for $500,000. Can't get another year out of that bad boy, can you?
Through the chair, I mean, obviously, we probably could, but I just tried to relay the fact that you try to get another year and then it breaks down and then you could be in trouble, especially given some of the conditions that we're in now. But certainly, if it's council's will, we could get another year out if we had to.
I'll probably have to fill out some form on that and just get a sense of what we're talking about.
Just a general comment. I'm not sure of lead times, but quite often lead times for those units are 8 to 10 months as well, right? So you're almost looking at a year delay already, anyways, by the time you put the tender out. So
very good point. I saw on page 159 the citizen satisfaction surveys. Those are annual. Is there any reason, is that normal that municipalities do an annual citizen satisfaction survey?
Through the chair, not in my experience, it's typically every 2 years. You sometimes will do one annually by exception. So it was fairly common practice during the pandemic to go to an annual just to see what had changed in a year of the pandemic, so to speak, and what residents were thinking. But under normal municipal operations, they're typically every 2 years.
And I'm seeing here they are going to move to every second year then, is that correct?
Yes, that's what we're proposing.
Okay. Then my final question for tonight is, I know there's been quite a bit of talk leading up to the budget about increasing our IT security. Is that in this budget? And where would I find it?
So I can just speak a little bit about that. Obviously, without going into too much detail, just due to the sensitivity around the security, we are undertaking an IT security assessment. We will be bringing forward actually a request to carry forward funds from the 2022 budget into the 2023 budget, so there's not an additional ask in 2023. So that will be coming as part of a separate process, but yes, it is very much still part of what we're considering in terms of moving forward.
Okay, so it's budgeted for, it's just the money is being moved from this year into next.
Correct, that's what we're proposing.
Okay, thank you so much. That's everything for me tonight. And again, this has been a great process, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Mr. Scoble, I have a quick question before I go to the other councillors. Do we receive any revenue for the old swimming pool building? I know we have Golden Hills using it. Do we receive revenue, or is that more of a small lease that we've worked out with them?
I'm going to defer to Mark on that there, right? He's got his hand up. So.
Your worship, and through the council, it's a nominal lease with Golden Hills.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We'll go now to Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Kevin, I think, CIO Scopel, I think this question is maybe best for you or perhaps Kara. I know that we've been undertaking a lot of asset management planning and work, and I was wondering if you could help point to where in the budget that's included so that I can have a look at that. I've had to read through, but 168 pages. I might have missed it.
Kara, can you help with that?
I'm actually going to ask Director Jamie to help with
Sure.
this question.
Yeah, so yeah, you probably, thank you for the question, and through the mayor. You won't see a lot of I guess items in there in relation to this in terms of asset management. We are in early days in terms of our asset management program. What you will see coming before you, not related to the budget, is an asset management policy later this year or early 2023. And then through that year, we'll be working on the asset management plan. But what it will do is really inform future budgets. So we do have the staff in place to do the work. And of course, everyone in the town that's involved in assets will be part of that work. But you won't see a lot of kind of budget impact on the front end. But what it'll allow us to do is inform how we big picture, I believe Director Rust spoke about, reserve accounts that we have and that they're not where we would like them to be. Our asset management plan and asset management process will really inform that moving forward and give us a little bit of intelligence on how we increase those and make sure they're getting to a place that is we're confident we can replace all of our assets we need to over time. So I hope that answers your question. But we are doing some work, and we've got a committee that meets regularly, and we're all excited by it. I think it's a really important thing we're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm excited by it too. And I'm glad you're working on it. So just to make sure that I understand correctly, there's not like a capital line item, capital budget line item associated with the development of the asset management program. These are kind of operational costs that we see through salaries and other expenses where it's distributed over. Is that correct?
At this point, yes. Moving beyond 2023, there may be requirements to do specific facilities or systems. We want to do have a third party do a review and look at the kind of existing status of that facility. There may be those kinds of things moving forward, but we don't have any identified in 2023.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That was my only question for now.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Peterson, and then Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. It follows Councillor Langmaid's question with regards to asset management, probably, but more in the area of projections. And I was just wondering, our CAO and Director Pretzloff have both talked in the past about JUPAs and about joint use agreements in terms of looking forward. And I'm wondering if that will be a consideration for conversation at this time, or if that's something for the future. And I can wait for that answer as well. And the second one relates to Councillor Wiley's question around the 911 call centers. And I believe that it was in May or June of this past year, that there were some pretty succinct information pieces that came forward around that through WADEMSA, through some of the examinations that came through. And I think it'd be really worthwhile visiting it, because certainly was a conversation in 2021 and in 2022, and it was an in-depth conversation with the previous acting CAO, and so it would be good to revisit that before we go too far, I think, and make sure that we have the fullness of that conversation in public, so that everyone can become aware. That's all I have, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Peterson. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. I just wanted if administration could just talk a little bit about what happens, like when something like a piece of equipment, for instance, like that truck, if we're replacing it and we sell the existing one, does that just get reflected on next year's budget, I guess, is the question, or is there Because I presume we haven't accounted for selling it, but do we know how much money we might get for that truck if we sell it?
Through the chair, I believe, and perhaps Leanna or Kara can speak to this. We do have a policy that guides how we dispose of those things. So I don't think we have a number on that old truck yet, but there is a process we have to go through that kind of guides how we sell it or take it to auction. I don't know if Kara or Leanna want to speak further to that.
Thank you. That is correct. We do take it to auction and we do put the money, we bring the money back into our general revenues and then we transfer the money back into a reserve so we can have future funding going forward. At this time, until we know what the dollar value that we're going to get, it could be $10, it could be $10,000, it could be $100,000. We don't have that number available at this current time. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't take $10 for it though, please.
That wouldn't even pay for the tires.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Mr. Scoble, are we also taking questions on things like the community grants, operating budget, things like that?
We could, I guess, in terms of what administrations put forth. I mean, obviously, we can't really speak to the individual groups themselves. They presented. So if it was specific to them, we could follow up with them. But certainly with the information we provided and the recommendations, we could speak to that.
Okay, I have just a general question about Lambert Center and the Happy Gang. It was a little confusing in their presentation as far as ownership of that portion of the building. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Happy Gang space is still town-owned, and we give them a really good lease rate per year. Mark?
Yes, Your Worship, and to the members of council. Right now, we're still trying to determine all the historical information that was presented by the Happy Gang. But we do own that building. We have a lease with the Happy Gang, and we've continued to support them through like a nominal lease fee, as well as sharing a portion of the utility costs.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. Further questions from councillors? I have one just on emergency services. I think we're all going through these charts and trying to understand them carefully. If we look at page 58 of 168, I just want to make sure I understand what's being here. Emergency services, salaries, wages, and benefits. And then if you read all the way across the right, it has the budget change versus 22 versus 23, an increase of 55.68%. Could someone just explain that to me? Thanks.
Yes, Your Worship. This is our emergency management and budget. And actually what we've identified in here is that there's some funding reallocations of staff salaries that should be allotted here. Part of the chief's salary, potentially the deputy fire chief, as well as some administrative support. That's why you're seeing such a bump there. It's again, the salaries just need to be reallocated appropriately.
So that would be a similar thing where you look at these salaries going up. It could be just a matter of reorganizing.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. I was a little scared at that one. And then the Lambert salary also showed a 67.28%. So that's good to know. I appreciate that. I think the Happy Gang did say, just coming back to that, I think the Happy Gang did say as part of the presentation, they feel they have some ownership of that portion. So if you folks can find any and all documents, that would be great to clarify that issue.
Yes, Your Worship. Mr. Dugdale and I in the Planning and Development Department are looking into that. Like you said, some of the documents that the Happy Gang has provided are new to us, and I'm not sure if the records that we have reflect what they have. So we're looking into that, and we'll be able to present some more information to council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have one additional question regarding the 2023 community grants. I'm not sure which member of the SLT would be best to answer this question, so I open it to all of you. And that's regarding the handy bus. I don't recall them joining us at our meeting on October 23rd 6th, where community groups came in, but I do see that there has been an increase in the requested amount. Could you maybe talk a bit about whether this is tied to the MOU that we have with them, or was this a request that came through in another manner?
So thank you for the question, Councillor Langmaid. So this is tied directly to the MOU and the inflationary increases that are specified in that actual agreement.
Perfect. That's what I expected, but I wanted to double check. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Any other questions from councillors? Thank you for all those questions, and to admin and staff directors, thank you for all your willingness and ability to answer those questions. Mr. Scoble, can I turn it back to you for next steps?
Thank you, Mayor. So, per the attachment there, or the package, the next steps are really, we'll be taking the, BIRs from now through to the 18th, I think, but the sooner that we can get them, the better, of course. That gives us more time to respond. And then, similarly, if council members wish to make an addition or subtraction or what have you from the budget, it would really be ideal to submit those ahead of time if possible, such that when we come in on the 20th, we've kind of got a list of items there for debate by council. And what will happen is motions that are made will go on consent agenda. So if a council member proposed to add, X thousand dollars for initiative Y, it would go on consent, and if nobody pulls it from the consent agenda, then that will actually happen. And so that's the intent for the 20th. And then we've got the 22nd is the next meeting. And so that's the first meeting. And then we've got additional meetings on the 24th and 29th, depending on how many motions council wants to consider in approving the budget. And of course, with the anticipated December 7th adoption of the budget and the rate bylaw. One piece of feedback we heard tonight is, I think in advance of the 7th, we'll work to provide information on the rate bylaw before that date as well. So that's, again, not a last minute thing there on the last evening of all the budget work for this year.
Thank you, Mr. Scoble. Can I just circle back, because this is brand new to all of us, that the BIR? I'm learning this new acronym. I'm learning this too. So if we had an area including the community grants that we felt a change would be made, we would submit it in that?
The idea behind the BIR is if you're contemplating making a change to a community grant and you want some additional information, this is to help you answer your questions you may have before you decide if you want to put in a motion to make that change that you're considering. So it's really a way to get more in-depth information of something that you're specifically looking at in the budget as an individual council member for debate with the rest of council.
Okay, thank you for that. So, Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. CIO Scoble, I am getting the hang of the BIR process now, and I understand where to use those forms. But you also mentioned that us sending in any proposed changes would be helpful for you prior to the next meeting on the 24th, I believe you said. What is the best method for us to send in those proposed changes? Is there a different form that we can use so that you're getting, a consistent format of requests, or can I make up my own form and put it in an email? What's the best way for us to get that information?
Typically, we're not using a form, but send it to Kara or Marcia. What we will work with you on is getting, I guess, the proposed motion in the proper form, I guess, so that it's good to go and correct in legislative terms and all that. I guess what I should comment is, if we're starting at 4.9 is what's proposed tonight, and then with all the, I guess, proposed motions we get, whether they're additions or deletions, we hope to run something called the taxometer. So if it's at 4.9 and council makes a decision for something that's going to cost 1%, then it goes up to 5.9, and then you reduce something by 0.5%. So it kind of gives you a real time, I guess, where you're at, so to speak, in getting through the budget. You know, you don't, it's a lot more helpful than doing a bunch of additions and deletions and then getting to the end and not having any idea what you are looking at, right? So it really helps you to track where you want to go as a council with an increase.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all. Thank you to staff and councillor who have taken part in this first step of the process. It's a bit of a learning curve for us all, I think, because it's new. It's a new method, and I like it. I think it's the visual presentation and the package is much more readily understood by all of us. I think it's a really good process compared to the past years. In my first term on council, we would have a weekend and a Friday night, all day Saturday, most of Sunday, and just be totally involved going through binders. And this and other years, this is an improvement for me over other terms for sure. So again, I'll echo some of the other councillors that I really appreciate the work of staff and leadership directors and our CAO in bringing this budget format to us, which is a real treat to actually be able to go through and understand more easily. So thank you to everyone. Anything further, Mr. Scoble?
I think that's good for administration this evening.
Okay, so at this point, I guess I will just be adjourning the meeting. I'd like to adjourn tonight's special council meeting for the first step of the budget process for 2023, and I will adjourn it at 7:17.
Night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.